Let me tell you a little story about a man named Jed. A poor mountaineer barely kept his family fed. And then one day he was shooting at some food, and up through the ground came a bubbling crude oil, that is, black gold, Texas tea. Well, I'm not actually going to tell you that story. I've got a better story to tell you here in Fayette, Michigan, way in the Upper Peninsula, down on a small peninsula in Big Bay de Noc. My friend Petoskey Pete and I, Mrs. Morrow, we're going to tell you a little history story about Fayette, Michigan. What do you say, Pete?
Well, the first thing I have to say is that was a silly song you were singing, Mrs. Morrow. I think that's the Beverly Hillbillies song. And yes, indeed, we are learning a lot about Fayette. We are also having a great time here. And did you know that Fayette was a boomtown of about 500 people during the 1870s and the 1880s? It was named after Fayette Brown, the Jackson Iron Company man who chose this site because of all the natural resources here.
Mr. Fayette Brown, he was a smart man, an agent of the iron company, and he came into here and he saw some of the natural resources that would be really useful in iron ore smelting. Some of those resources include, take a look, the beautiful dolomite cliffs. He also noticed the hardwood trees like oak and the beech and birch trees, a little softer. One other great natural resource for the iron ore smelting was this beautiful bay here in Big Bay de Noc. Take a look at that bay. They needed that bay for shipping, to ship the pig iron out of here. Nice protected harbor called Snail Shell Harbor. Perfect spot to bring the ships in to collect the pig iron and ship it on out of here. What do you say, Pete?
Yes, indeed, that's true. And Fayette was one of the Upper Peninsula's most productive iron smelting operations. Now let's take a walk through this town and try to imagine some of the people who worked here. It's pretty remarkable that so many buildings here in Fayette have survived over a century. Fayette has 19 buildings still standing. You can see some of them here in the background. You can see the schoolhouse and the hotel there on the right-hand side, and over to the left is the town hall. Just beyond the hotel is the machine shop. Let's go down there and take a look.
Okay, friends, Pete and I, we're going to take you inside the machine shop. It'll be a little tour of how they do the iron ore smelting. Hey, Pete, you ready to go on inside this building? Come on, let's take our friends in for a tour. Okay, we're inside now. We're going to tell you about the iron smelting process. And there are three natural resources that come right out of Michigan. One of them does not come from this area, and it's the iron ore. That comes from Naugany, Michigan, and it's brought down here by rail in the 1800s. By rail, I mean by a train. And then right here, remember those cliffs that you saw? That's the limestone that they used. And the hardwoods is another thing that came right off of the land here. They used oak and birch and beech and hardwoods to mix all these three ingredients together. We'll show you that here in a minute. I want to show you on the map though. Let me put Pete down here. Show you on the map. Imagine here's the Upper Peninsula. You can see the whole thing. And right here is Lake Michigan. And you can see if this were the bridge over here, you come up and you come across the Upper Peninsula and you go way down here to Fayette. Fayette's where we are right now. But the iron ore comes up here from Naugany, way up here by Marquette. It's a raw material that they used. They brought it down by rail. They took it here to Escanaba. That's across the peninsula from us. And in Escanaba, they put it on a ship. They brought it right over here into the bay, Big Bay de Noc, and unloaded it here in Fayette that you saw down there in the bay. Let me tell you about the iron smelting process. It starts with our three natural ingredients that come right here from the land of Michigan. The iron ore comes from Naugany across the rails down to Escanaba, remember, and it comes in here on something called a scow. So you got the iron ore coming in here. You got the men hammering at the limestone cliffs, the dolomite cliffs, getting the pieces of dolomite and limestone out of there. At the same time, you've got these kilns, 80 of them, all over this peninsula down here, and men are burning up the hardwood, turning it into smaller pieces of charcoal. The three ingredients that they need get hauled over here. This is a steam-powered lift. They dump all three ingredients here together. A steam-powered lift takes it right to the top of this stack. They dump those three ingredients at the top. As they're falling down in, the blast furnace heats it up, sets that charcoal back on fire, causes a chemical reaction, and the iron ore and the limestone mix together. The limestone is used to take the impurities out of the iron ore. That creates something called the slag. So when you get down to the bottom, you've got a mixture of slag that comes to the top and the iron ore at the bottom. They pull a plug out. The iron ore here at the bottom seeps out into these channels. These are called molds. And a man once said, hey, that looks like little piglets nursing off its pig. That's where the term pig iron comes from, because it looked like pigs nursing. This fills up here with all of the iron ore. These are molds. It hardens, and they call it pig iron. They take the pig iron, they put it on these carts here, and they take it off onto the ships down in the harbor, and they ship this pig iron off to different places where they can use it in industries and turn it into steel. The slag, however, left in a pile, they cleaned that out every now and then. They took that slag and threw it down on the beaches of Lake Michigan. Pete, can you lift this pig iron? Let's give it a try. This is pretty heavy, boys and girls. I don't think I can lift this. But Pete, look at this, I got a wave. Pete, you know that term called leverage? Well, I got a little leverage here now. The little leverage right here, the lever, the fulcrum of the lever is right under here. That's a little science thing going on. But let me show you how to lift this. Now I can lift the pig iron. Pete, do you think they might have used leverage when they were hauling their pig iron around?
I'm not sure what they used to help carry this heavy pig iron, but I sure hope they had some kind of leverage. Perhaps if Louis Follow was alive, he could tell us. He was a young Norwegian man who maintained Fayette's industrial equipment right from this shop. They had lots of heavy machinery here. It was a hot job and hard work. And Louis Follow and the other machinists, they got paid $1.80 per day. Doesn't seem like very much money in this time. We'll have to check that out and compare it to today's prices. By the way, Mrs. Morrow, I don't think the city where the iron ore came from, I don't think we call that Nogany. I think it's called Nagani. We'll check that one out too.
Here's a little bit of reality about what it might have really been like here in Fayette when the working people were here. Take a look at this picture. You can see they're a pretty dirty group of men. They look like some hard workers. I would call this job labor intensive. And if I close my eyes and just sit for a minute, I think I can imagine what it was like. Hear the sounds of the rock crushers, the sounds of the steam, the sounds of the kids running around. Boy, this must have been a loud and dirty place to grow up. What do you think, Pete?
I think you're right about labor intensive. That means really hard work all day long. Wow. Mrs. Morrow, that gives us another chance to think about how natural history influenced human history. We've got a fine example here of human-environment interaction and how these natural resources help change the history of Michigan.
December 1st, 1890. This was the last day that pig iron was made here in Fayette. But in order to truly understand the significance of that and why that happened, I'm going to let Pete give you a little history about iron smelting that took place not just here in Michigan, but in places like Chicago and other places around the United States where they did iron smelting, but they didn't use charcoal.
That's right, Mrs. Morrow. There were other iron smelting places in the United States. Places like Chicago, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland, who all use coal for their fuel. That is unlike the use of the charcoal that was used here in Fayette. The charcoal iron smelting of Fayette was a specialty product, making it more expensive than the coal-smelted iron. However, after the Civil War, there was a strong demand for the high-quality pig iron made here in Fayette. Most of the iron produced here was converted to steel, which became railroad rails. Fayette was booming with business and production until two things happened. First, the coal iron smelting made improvements in the quality of their iron, so the customers were no longer willing to pay the higher prices for the charcoal iron. Second, the fuel supply here on the Garden Peninsula of Fayette had become depleted. That means most of the trees had been used up. Sadly for the workers, the Jackson Iron Company closed its smelting operation and left Fayette. Lots of families had lost their jobs and couldn't pay their bills. Now that's something that I have a question about. They never tell us what happened to all of the families. We'll have to do a project on that one, eh, Mrs. Morrow?
Take a look at the families here on Portage Street and Hill Street. What do you think the families felt like? Choose the names of one of these families, make it your family, and tell us what it felt like on the day they told you you were done, and what did you do as a family from there.